Hello, guys. So I'll give you a question now. You just see the question and think about it, and then we will try to answer that question, how you will be proceeding that in the exam in case if you get that similar question. So here is the question. Just think about this for a moment. The colonial rule over India ended in 1947, but the colonial hangover continues till date. So basically, you will be talking about concept of westernization and everything that's there. But think about this for a moment. What all things you will be writing in this particular answer? Okay, so see, the British colonial rule brought significant social change in Indian society, culture, polity, economics, and everything. So you need to mention briefly about that. And then you can talk about various sociologists have tried to sum up the impact of colonial rule, right? If you talk about M.N. Srinivas' concept of westernization, or you can talk about, Yogendra Singh's concept of modernization, or the revivalist thinkers, nationalism. So these are the three dimensions you can mention. So, if I need to briefly tell you about westernization, M.N. Srinivas defines westernization as the changes brought about in Indian society and the culture as a result of over 150 years of British rule. And that's the term subsuming changes occurring at different levels, right? So, in terms of technology, in terms of institutions, in terms of ideology, in terms of value, the changes have permeated to each and every aspect of social life, the caste system, the judgmani system, and everywhere it has made impact. You can talk about westernization in terms of primary westernization, secondary westernization, right? So all those dimensions you can again mention, and the third level also. And it's a cultural change and not a structural change. When we talk about Yogendra Singh will also talk about the structural understanding. So the impact of westernization was seen in increased avenues of social mobility, right? Changes in food habits and the dressing style, giving up of many superstitious beliefs and rituals. For example, the child marriages, sati, etc. So you can mention about this, and you can see westernization is seen more as an imitation of external form of culture, and does not necessarily mean adoption of modern values like democracy and equality. So here it's a kind of imitation, westernization. So those who are came directly into contact with the English, that's the primary westernized people, and then those who came with these primary westernized people, that's the secondary westernized people. So there is a lot of adoption of these culture from the West. That's what you normally see, westernization. And it's not a structural change, it's basically a cultural change. And when you talk about Yogendra Singh's concept of modernization, Yogendra Singh contends that the British impact brought a new tradition of modernization, which led to both cultural and structural change. So here he talked at the both levels, one at cultural level and the structural level. And if you look at the cultural level, modernization of tradition that took place, which was visible in the amelioration of caste system, reform of for women, struggles against various social evils, urbanization, form of education, and so on. So many different dimensions you can mention. And if you look at the cultural, so that's a cultural level. And if you look at the structural level, new social classes like the middle class emerged, and the industrial elite, working class, and new institutions like market based economy, universalistic legal superstructure, bureaucracy, and changes like rise of nationalism, politicization of society. All these were seen. So these are the structural level. So I repeat, at the cultural level, you can see modernization of tradition took place, which was visible in in terms of caste system change, changes which has happened, reform for women, right, sati or marriage, all those widow remarriage, struggle against social evils, right, and urbanization, form of education, and all those things, right. Structural level, we talk about middle class, industrial elite, working class, new institutions like market-based economy, universalistic legal superstructure, bureaucracy, right? All these have actually led to again a rise of nationalism, politicization of society. All these you can see at the structural level. Then, when you talk about the revivalist thinkers, you can talk about the colonial rule help re-emphasize the lost glory of India. So these are what you can actually mention. And so social change, if you see, is understood as an evolutionary process, and hence the changes brought about during the colonial rule did not end or reverse once the colonial rule ended. It continued, of course, right? So it's an evolutionary process. So that's again a part of evolution. And India achieved its political independence from British in 1947, but its culture, and institutions can still be seen in the colonial hangover as there are a lot of examples again you can give. You can talk about educational institutions, you can talk about the political institutions, you can talk about administration, even judiciary, culture, and everywhere. See, if you talk about education institutions, the primacy is attached to the English language as a symbol of intellect, which is continuing, right? And which makes sure that, till date, the missionary schools are the most sought after for education for children. So that is in the education institutions. Political institution, if you see, much of the parliamentary procedures working actually follow the conventions of the British rule, right? So if you see that Venkaiah Naidu, I beg to lay the papers, to be replaced with I rise to lay the papers on the table. That statement you can talk about. So again, there also you're following the legacy or the elements of West. In fact, British their legacy. Administration, if you see that, recently developed corporate structure as very fluid and dynamic way of functioning, but government offices are still caught up with bureaucracy, strict hierarchy of positions, and concentration of power at the top, right? So you see, you can talk about IAS, you can talk about IPS. All these are again, say, army. Everywhere it is very clearly visible, especially if you see army and bureaucracy. So again, when we talk about the culture, you can talk about Western food, dressing habits are considered superior when it comes to the Western style, and have overshadowed Indian versions to a great extent. We can talk about examples, the kind of dress, the jeans, shorts, right? Instead of sari, salwar, lungi, and all those things, and the obsession with wearing coat, pants, and all these again are the influence of West. So, see, these are the things that you can talk about. You can also talk about certain legislations, the forest laws, the Indian Police Act, Indian Evidence Act. So there are some changes which has come recently, the Indian Penal Code, but the crux of it again remained the same, right? Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, but the crux of it, which actually remained the same. All these are largely based on the British rule and the ethics which they followed, which aim to control the local population through a dictatorial, the rule. So, again, if you talk about tribals, till date, the tribals and the forest dwellers do not enjoy their forest rights in, in the real sense. And the police is seen as, instrument for imposition. So this is how they wanted to control us at that point of time. They created the laws, and same way it is actually continuing. So you don't want to write this critically, but you just need to have an idea about this, and you will be in a position to write examples. Again, economy. If you look at post-independence, land reforms were not successful, and the legacy of British rule still continued. Majority of the land is still owned by few dominant higher caste groups. Dalits were completely or never allowed to acquire their meaningful share, even after that also. If you talk about the social life, the Indian values of communitarian living have eroded, and the consumerist culture continue to expand in the in this process in the attempt to mark themselves elite. So again, class stratification you can talk about that have actually helped the Indian system of stratification and continue to operate. So there is a class stratification. Some again, you see this cricket euphoria, the tea culture, left-hand driving. All these are again associated with the legacy from the colonial past. So but some evils, social evils like communalism are a hangover, which is, he challenges to be fabric of Indian society. For example, various communal violence you can talk about. So these are elements that I want you to include in your answer. When we talk about international relations and boundaries, you can see arbitrary boundaries, both national and international, inner line permit, right? Again, all these are colonial legacies. See, the colonial hangover is a real phenomena, but the present social conditions are defined by a multitude of factors, as you can describe like globalization. You can talk about it has ensured that the values and institutions from across the world are being shared to generate a cosmopolitan culture. Then U.S. cultural values. You can talk about how it has been shared, like McD, Domino's, popularity of Hollywood. So, and on the other hand, if you see Indian traditions like yoga, Indian cuisine, and Indian festivals find acceptance in the worldwide also. So this is a part of globalization. So see, many phenomena like consumerist culture, nuclearization of families are not entirely colonial hangover, but influence of Western culture whose contemporary definition is wider than just a British culture. So we can mostly talk about the present days, globalization instead of simply westernization. And Yogendra Singh also talk about traditionalization of modern society. So even in the present times, it's observed that traditions are being helped by Western innovations like Sanskar channels over cable TV, matrimonial websites providing caste and ethnicity filters, right? Temples offering e-darshana, Kundli software in laptop. All these are such kind of examples. And this shows many traditional Indian values and institutions continue to operate despite this kind of westernization, globalization, etc. So there also exists, a call to the glorious past where traditional elements are being glorified to raise the pride associated with one's own culture. So active efforts are being made for some changes like separation of railway budget from general budget, etc. So what I want to tell in conclusion is Indian society certainly experience a colonial hangover. That's there. The elements which have caused positive change, like introduction of Western scientific education, the liberal values of democracy, equality, rule of law, it must be appreciated. Further, the utility of knowing the English language, right? That's actually a utility for greater mobility, And again, using of Western clothes and everything that will actually help you to, give a good feel of mobility. These cannot be ignored. But a revamp of certain structures like police forces is, required. What is at this present situation, we need a revamp compared to pre-independence situation, because that is what actually required for a democracy. So these are the things that you can mention in your answer. So I hope you got some idea, and everything else you need to fine tune it, and that we will be discussing in the test series. So guys, see you in the next video. Thank you so much.